It is currently 9 minutes after 11 o'clock. We are inside Brunch. My next guest is Rishi Maharaj, who is the CEO for Disclosure Today. That's a citizens watchdog group in Trinidad and Tobago. Rishi, you've been here before, so thank you so much, man. Welcome.
Thank you. Very good morning to your listeners.
We are in the middle of a whole lot of things going on. We're in the middle of the Chief Justice, former High Court judge, the JLSE. That's the organization headed by the Chief Justice that should have vetted or verified the information submitted. And we're talking about disclosure, you see, because if we have transparency, then it works. We're in the middle of what Errol Pilgrim, my former guest, made a juxta between FATCA, because it's disclosure as to foreign property owned. Well, let's put it that way. FATCA set up to ensure that Americans who live here are not owning property that the IRS cannot account for. There is a reciprocal arrangement in that. That reciprocity is the issue that many folks believe there was so much disquiet among folks here because, again, that's transparency as to what you own outside. Therein you see the juxtaposition, the link between that and property tax that folks know is going to be up there, is going to be transparent. Folks can see how much property you own, Rishi, and how much property your relatives own. And of course, the natural extension of that is if Rishi, who I know makes a whole lot of money, okay, take that back. but the point is, if Rishi can justify what he owns, but his family members, immediate family members cannot, the BIR, Board of Inland Revenue, may want to say, well, you explain to me how you got this. Now, there's a possibility it may trace all the way back to Rishi. Folks are saying that is part of the scare that people have. Transparency is what we're talking about. Your organization is there for good governance. Let's talk about the brouhaha we are hearing as it relates to transparency. Is it just what you are hearing, or do you say property tax is one issue and the transparency is another? You come in.
I think there's a relation between the two. And the relation is that simply a lot of people are making clamoring noise of property tax and they don't want to pay the property tax. But then you also hear another argument that, well, I already pay 25% tax on my income. Every time I go to the grocery, I pay 12.5% in tax, value added tax. Every time I get paid, I pay health surcharge. Every time I fill up my gas tank, there's supposed to be a road tax attached to that, as well as property tax. So a lot of money is coming out of me that the state is generating that's supposed to be done for the good of the society. Yeah. Are we seeing the good that is supposed to be these money is supposed to be used for to benefit the population?
Separating two things here before you go on, because like in the United States, for instance, you pay building tax, you pay water rates tax on that, you pay social security tax, you pay state, local government and federal government tax. So everywhere in the world you got to pay taxes.
You got to pay tax, yeah.
All right.
No way you got to.
So I just mentioned that to say by way of those who think that they are unfairly being given the burden of taxation. I think in the United States, the margin is 33%, except for Trump's people. But and it's only 25% here for the high earners. Right. All right, so it is not good enough to say, look, we are being burdened with more taxes. So your statement, if I got you right in the opening salvo, is transparency is the issue, or what is being done with the money.
Yeah, exactly. How is your money being used? I mean, we've heard. Previously, Mr. Pilgrim talked about the 5 years of corruption. We've heard of corruption for decades in Trinidad and Tobago in different avenues. Exactly what systems is government putting in place to move us, and if I can use a monitoring and evaluation term here, move away from outputs, which are things that you can see, buildings, roads, new schools, new hospitals, new police stations, to outcomes and impacts. What comes out of building new police stations? Reduction in crime. What should be the outcome of building new health centers and new hospitals? Reduction in your mortality rate and reduction in a better standard of living. Are people seeing these impacts? Or are we just seeing buildings going up, roads being built, money being siphoned through the use of this because we don't have proper procurement legislation, because we don't have proper campaign finance legislation that allows us to see who's contributing to political parties? Are they now being unbiasedly favored in the procurement process? Not having proper whistleblowing systems in place to allow people who see these things happening to be able to whistleblow and say, listen, hey, raise a red flag, X and Y and Z is going on here that's may be corrupt. Let's investigate it. So without these proper systems and mechanisms put in place, people are querying and are very reluctant as to exactly how is my money being used. Am I seeing benefits from my money? If I get sick and I go to the hospital, sometimes I still have to wait 24 hours, 48 hours. I pay health surcharge every month. Does it mean I now have to go spend more money to go to a private health facility? So these are the transparency issues that I think we need to focus on and look on with regards to not only property tax, but everything that we're dealing with here.
Well, because therein lies the situation. I speak to, fellow Trinbagonians all the time, and the issue that they raise is, I want to know, when are you all going to clean up this madness you have here? And I say to them, well, you've got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it starts with property tax, which was there before, but because of technology, we now have the transparency that will be involved. That could be a beginning towards what you just articulated there. All these things, we can ask later on, let us see the expenditure, let us see what is allocated, this and how that money is spent. We can do that later on, but you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly. And the somewhere you're starting is not you introducing legislation here. This is legislation already there, was suspended. It was not repealed, it was suspended.
Well, to quote the Minister of Finance, he's correct in saying we've always had a property tax per se. I mean, before 2009, there was land and building tax that many people paid on their land and their buildings. I mean, I remember going to help with my mom to pay for our properties that we had, and it was like $110 in San Juan for two separate properties. I mean, it was very low. So I think the whole idea of the property tax now was to bring it into modern day, what other countries are doing with regards to their property tax, and being able also to account for these different things that's going on to make, and in a way to make it a little more equitable. Should I, with my little 2-bedroom house, be paying the same kind of property tax as somebody with a 7-bedroom house, 6 bathrooms, are paying? So
and
I
that's
guess
where you can appeal after
exactly,
they do the mass assessment. Then you can appeal.
And that's because when you read the legislation, I think I first would have spoken about this last week. When you read the legislation, what you're doing now, you're not doing an assessment. What you're doing now is providing information to the Ministry of Finance, to the Evaluation Division.
Yes.
What they're going to do now with that is they're going to use that as a basis to say, okay, based on what we see here, and based on the region, and based on what we see in other information for the area, we're now going to make an assessment that your property tax, your annual rental value may be $3,500 to $4,000 a month. So that's 4,000 by 12. That's $48,000 for the year, minus the 10%. So this is this will be your tax for the year, which I think works out to about $1,600 or $1,700.
So let us see if we get this right. They're going to do a mass assessment. You are going to look at your property and go like, that's not the case, because these things you all give me in this mass assessment is not correct. I appeal this.
Right.
Then they're going to say, well, let us look at your situation, but if we have questions about it, we will send somebody only in that case to verify.
Exactly.
But once that has been taken care of, care of, you get the adjustment.
Exactly, because you also have the right now to give your own valuation.
Right.
Bring somebody in to your property, say, okay, this is the valuation I got. Give me your valuation. Then now both parties sit down and say, okay, this is the valuation.
And you look at them.
And then we come together and we work out, okay, this is what we think the final figure is going to be. And then you move with that. So it's not that somebody's going to be banging on at your door or at your front gate saying, let me in.
Exactly.
To come and see exactly what you have.
Which is one of the fear factors that's being passed outside that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
In all that you said, folks want to see where their money is being spent.
Exactly.
You, Rishi Maharaj, on behalf of Disclosure Today, you're not telling folks, because of all these things, don't pay your taxes.
No. And taxes are important. I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, let's face it, we're in a recessionary period right now. I think we have a deficit of close to $17-18 billion. I mean, because of oil and gas revenues sinking, we have a decrease in foreign revenues coming into the country. Government has to make up the money somewhere to be able to continue to provide goods and services to the population, to be able to pay salaries, to be able to pay pensions, to be able to provide medicines for the hospital and stuff like that. We're looking at close to $500 million, I think, from what I understand the Minister of Finance is saying. That they want to
$500 million is what he's hoping.
What they want to raise. And if it's retroactively, 2016, 2017, that's probably close to $1 billion. That could be used for public goods. So, I mean, in the end, if you refuse now to pay your taxes, you're not only hurting, you're going to be hurting yourself. Because at the end of the day, some of the services you would want to get. Yeah, if you're not, like I always say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Without question. At the end of the day, the infrastructure of the country And that's why I'm equally reluctant when folks say, for instance, I want this money specifically for the area or the region it was collected from, which is one of the arguments or one of the proposals for local government. But right now, Trinidad and Tobago is a small place, quite frankly. And right now, the infrastructure, the roads and stuff, you travel on them. It's not that you travel in this state and you don't travel in that state. What is it? San Fernando to Port of Spain? Sangre Grande to Port of Spain?
Right.
I mean, you're using the stuff. And while it's good for folks to say, and there may be some merit in folks saying, well, X amount of money should be given for local development. These are capital projects, big projects, governmental projects that actually get these things done, the big projects. And of course, you've got to pay the taxes. So to ask for the money to be put in a specific fund raises a whole different area. But I want to stay with you as the CEO of Disclosure today. Do you see the unarticulated fear of disclosure as an important factor in this objection to property tax?
Let me look at it from two angles. I think there may be a fear of transparency. Again, I mean, Woodrow Wilson said it many years ago that transparency is the disinfectant for sunlight, is disinfecting sunlight for what goes on in dark shadows. So I think many people may be fearful because in the end now you're going to know exactly what somebody's properties that now people have.
Yes.
Because I mean, it's now going to be stored in maybe a database at the Ministry of Finance, at the Valuation Division, or at Ball and Revenue. So now you're going to know exactly how much properties that people have all over the place in one aspect. So sometimes people may be fearful of that. But I think also we're using this, and I think Mr. Pilgrim raised the point quite correctly, politicizing the issue a lot. And the problem is that we're politicizing the issue ethnically. I think that causes that's a huge concern, at least for me, with regards to trying to play the ethnicity card. It's dangerous, and it shows a lack of thinking.
Oh, a lack of commitment to the unity of the nation.
Because again, I mean, I didn't want to go into Dr. Tiwari, but I guess let's go into Dr. Tiwari. He mentioned that, I mean, they came on in 2010. On a campaign of Axi tax.
Yes.
That was one of the main pillars for the Congress of the People. You were in government for 5 years. 5 years is a long time in government. What systems did you put in place to be able to move, to be able to reform, to be able to adjust? I know you said it was law and the last law was repealed. All you had to do was probably just go to Parliament, repeal the law, and then bring in the other law back retroactively to now come and state, well, we plan to do it for 5 years. We spoke about it. The Minister of Finance spoke about it. He spoke about it in a newspaper article in the Sunday Express, I think sometime in 2013, that he feels that the people want to pay their taxes, that we've lost close to $300-something million back in 2013. That was his quote. And that he believes that people want to pay their taxes. So now 5 years after, 2 years afterwards, and now use the card, we tried to do it, we couldn't do it. And, blaming somebody else for your failures, I think it's a poor showing.
The one thing about Dr. Bo Tiwari I respect is that he never shies away from coming to speak of an issue, and whether one is in agreement or disagreement with him, when you have a representative who is prepared to come forward with a view, it is something that you're thankful for.
Exactly.
I amend very quickly that 3% does not anyway begin to look like onerous to me. Even with the variables that he identified, because those who pay taxes in other places, who observe taxes in other places, will know. I want to go into the judiciary. We had conversation here in one of your many visits in which we spoke that folks who are being appointed to boards, folks who are in higher levels of responsibility when they are applying for the job, that information, as best as possible, protecting confidentiality, but as far as possible should be put out there so folks see who is applying for what, for any contradictions and so on and so on. How much would that degree of transparency been beneficial even to the JLSE? How beneficial would that degree of transparency have been in a case like that, which is the chief magistrate, magistrate heirs?
Well, but let's look at it from this point of view. I mean, the Judicial Legal and Services Commission is a commission set up by the Constitution. So it has constitutional authority to be able to appoint judges and legal officers throughout the country with regards to the judiciary. But part of that is also that there needs to be confidence in the system that proper systems are put in place to appoint people to certain levels. Now, I'm not going to get into should she have been appointed, should proper vetted. I mean, the judiciary guards their independence great. I think I read in the papers today where they're refusing to go before a joint select committee of parliament saying that we don't answer to you and stuff like that. So I know they're very guarded. But in the same respect, there ought to be certain transparency in terms of the way the process goes forward. Nobody's saying that we need to know beforehand who you're going to appoint and what you're going to do. But there needs to be some openness with regards to how does this go about? What happens? Who selects the names? Is it randomly selected? What's the process that goes through that? What's the process that you use in order to vet anybody that comes beforehand? Do you put proper things in place to be able to vet? For example, I mean, the case we have here with the former chief magistrate with regards to having outstanding matters in the court. And the problem it will have elevating the individual now to a high court judge with regards to her matters in the magistrate court. What were the proper vetting rules in place? Do you have proper procedures to deal with that? That maybe you could have said, okay, good. This is a person we've identified to maybe appoint as a high court judge because of her legal standing and legal knowledge and legal background. But knowing that there's a lot of outstanding matters in place, couldn't systems be put in place to allow her to be able to speed up her matters or to get other people to deal with the matters in tandem so that her backlog becomes erased, thereby allowing her to be able to ascend to a high court judge? These are things that are not secretive. I mean, we're not talking about going into the in-depth what you do, how you do it, who does what, but at least understand how the process operates. Because in the end of the day, I mean, there was a judgment years ago in the case of the Public Service Commission with a guy who filed a FOI request to get information with regards to why he was bypassed for, I think, Deputy Permanent Secretary. And the judge in that case ruled that there ought to be some transparency in the way these matters are handled, because in the end of the day, permanent secretaries and deputy permanent secretaries perform a major function in the way ministries operate, and it impacts on the citizens at the end of the day. Similarly with the Judicial Legal Services Commission, appointing judges and magistrates and other senior people within judiciary impacts the day-to-day lives of citizens in one way or another, and there ought to be some transparency or openness in terms of the way the process is done and the process done. And maybe now time has probably now come for us to revisit how these things operate. I mean, these are an institution that was set up in the 1950s, 1960s.
The JLSC, you made reference to them a moment ago, just so that our listeners be very clear. That's the
Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Right. So, I mean, they were set up back in the 1960s under the Constitution of 1962. So maybe now the time probably is right for us to revisit the way it goes about doing its function to allow for a more transparent, open system, so I can know exactly what's going on.
There are many who, before I get to a burning issue on the table this morning, but there are many who say, for instance, there's now a call by unions, there's now a call by labor, there is now a call by many people for things to be put in place today. And they had a long time, up to 10 years before that, nobody was calling for that. Is that a fair charge? That there is a new recognition that we should get accountability with the assent of this government, would you say? Or is it a case that the technology was not available back then? I mean, why it seems to be, or is the perception incorrect that folks are now calling for more vigilance in the area of accountability, etc.?
I think the perception probably is wrong. I mean, I could recall, I mean, back in my younger, smaller days of reading of scandals in the newspapers, of people coming out and bringing out ideas, and people calling for the whole idea of being more accountable and being more transparent. So I don't think it's something that's new now. I think what's spurred it on now is the growth of information technology, the information age that we live in, that you have access to so much information that you're now seeing exactly what goes on in other countries when people make the call for transparency and accountability, that actually forces government to change. It actually forces government to back down. I mean, the example it could be was in last year in Romania, where the government wanted to pass a legislation that would have impacted and in regards of corruption and procurement. And the people protested on the street, went into the street en masse and protested against this motion. And the government had to back down and say, so now we are seeing these things happening in other countries. And I think now a lot more pockets of groups are being more coming out. And they also with the expansion of social media and other platforms to get your voice and get your message out there. I think that is now allowing the call to be more vocal. more widespread.
11:28 on time. I'm always moved when folks make a big deal about the information being out in the public domain, because, as you know, there are some organizations, some agencies, some online agencies you can pay a fee to and find out everything about somebody if you wanted to. I mean, everything. Anyway, in the case of transparency, TSTT, Chairman Elias said, I don't have to account to this body, I don't have to explain to this body anything in the area of transparency and your understanding of governance. How do you and Disclosure Today weigh in on his statement that he does not have to bring that degree of transparency into the dealings of TSTT?
Well, as far as I can remember, and subject to correction, TSTT is still a state enterprise that falls under the control of government, 51% to 49%. Of course, that 49% was going to be dissolved somewhere or the other with CW whenever they move here this year, but it's still a government control organization, a board appointed by the government.
But he's an intelligent man. We know he is. How could he miss that? I mean, what you think?
I wouldn't want to go into the mind of Mr. Elias and try to figure exactly what. But from a practical point of view, and I heard Mr. Remy on earlier and speak about it, and I will concur with him, having worked in government for 10 years, and myself having actually been on a board also. That you're subject to the State Performance Monitoring Manual of the Ministry of Planning, or the Ministry of Finance, sorry, and you're also, because TSTT is a state enterprise, shares owned by the government through the National Enterprises Limited, I think, NEL. Then obviously, and the way it works in other private sector organizations throughout the world that I've seen, especially you had the example of recently with TCL was taken over by Mexico.
Limited, yes.
And before that whole process went through, they had to take it to their shareholders for the shareholders to be able to approve the process. Who are the shareholders of TSTT? The corporation sold, the Minister of Finance. So obviously, before moving to take any major acquisition,
$255 million.
It's a lot of money. So before you can move forward to take part, the board could sanction and say, okay, this is where we want to go. So there's a board sanction, a board resolution. We approve this. Now to move forward, we need to get the approval of our shareholders. Who's the shareholder of TSCT? Corporation sold, Minister of Finance.
Precisely.
Obviously, you should have gone. It's a no-brainer under the State Performance Management and under the whole idea of the SEC and the whole idea of the Companies Act and stuff like that you ought to get your approval of your shareholders. Go to the Corporation Sole Minister of Finance, who at that time, my assumption would be, will probably say, will take it to the cabinet to get the cabinet sanction before you move forward. So to him to bypass and say he didn't have to do that, for me, I think it's ruinously wrong.
I just find it amazing because I would not hazard to go into the mind of anybody, like you said. But I am amazed at the statement, and there are folks in the public arena who are arguing as to the legitimacy or the sound ground on which he said that or not. I just don't see it.
And then the other question comes to mind now: would this now have to be approved by TAT? Because now one telecommunications
yes.
by another telecommunications. Similarly, when CW bought Flow and they had to go through TAT to get TAT approval and get the other regulators in the Caribbean's approval, would it have to be approved by TAT, and would it also have to be an approval by the Securities and Exchange Commission?
Right.
So
both regulatory bodies.
Exactly, from a telecommunication point of view, from a company's point of view. So these are things that also we need to be cognizant of.
And by way of clarity, so folks understand, because Mr. Elias and the board went through with this agreement and they shook hands with it and so on. This is not the begin all and end all, because you may have the regulatory bodies that they have to get approval from.
Of course, and
the corporation soul has not yet weighed in.
How it works in the States, for example, when one company, they say, okay, we've agreed, Apple has agreed to purchase another company, for example. I'm here right now looking to purchase Disney, but that's a different story. But so agreement in principle to purchase the company subject to the approval of the regulators. We haven't heard that, but obviously my mind is thinking that Marcy has a telecommunications license. TSCT has a telecommunication license. Obviously, TAT has to come in there and have some approval process with regards to that. So then in my mind, I'm also thinking that Securities and Exchange Commission is going to also have to come in and play a part in investigating and approving whatever merger takes place there.
You are asking, we are talking about the TSTT deal of Massey Communications, and we are talking about the chairman saying, I don't have to provide this information to you because, this is a corporation decision, etc., etc. But in the area of transparency, it's public funds, all right, 51%. And you, from disclosure today, I think, or you just tell me, am I on good footing to say that we need to see the details of the deal?
I would say I mean, obviously.
I mean, how you paying this 255 million?
Right, and
we need to know.
And obviously, they're going to claim confidentiality regards to commercial interests and stuff and secrecy. But under the Freedom of Information Act is also the possibility of reducing information. So certain confidential information could be, but I mean, to tell me exactly how you're going to fund this, that's not commercial interest in my mind. That doesn't do anything with trade secrets in my mind. So are you going to now get a loan? Are you going to go into debt to be able to buy this company?
Yeah, I heard $1.9 million being in the 5-year development plan.
What are you going to do? So exactly the details, and they always say the devil's in the details.
Always.
What are the details of this deal that you can make public that doesn't infringe on certain confidential commercial rights?
I hear what you're saying. Dr. Anthony Birchwood, economist, scheduled to join us during this hour here. He has become a victim of what we all know. It's called TRAFFIC, traffic. So if he gets in here on time, we will be able to complete that side of it. But it's a very important area, that area of when you hear that the country is being downgraded, what it means. My guest here is the CEO of Disclosure Today. He's Rishi Maharaj, who could not get here at a more appropriate time when we're talking about transparency and accountability. All right, transparency is accountability. However, the Auditor General has said, nobody's really paying attention to me. First of all, they're not paying attention to the law. And then when I give out these advisories that I've been giving for years that nobody's submitting on time, nobody's doing anything about it. This is messed up. Speak to me from your organizational standpoint.
It is. I mean, the Auditor General has been making these complaints over and over and over and over. And somehow you seem to be making the same mistakes over and over. And ministries and state agencies seem to be not either A, not taking on, or B, just ignoring the Auditor General because there's no teeth in the Auditor General to bite back to punish them. And that's the problem because, I mean, just recently we sent in disclosure today that they sent in a Freedom of Information request to Parliament to get a listing of all the agencies that report to the Public Account Enterprises Committee. They happen to be 52. And we also want a list of all those agencies that have submitted their financial audited statements from the period 2008 to 2015. And what we got back actually was that 18 out of the 52 have submitted statements one way or the other, but there are 34 state agencies that have been negligent and submitted their audited financial statements in the PAEC. And what we're going to do now is going to put this information out on the public domain through our Facebook page and through our blog on our Polywatch website. So I mean, it's really scary and that these state enterprises are not complying with their functions. Because
to find out 3 years later and 5 years later that somebody had bad management or money's been questionably used, it really is not the point. Every year we're supposed to see this. You're supposed to submit it so we can act on this early and stop the bleeding if there is bleeding.
Exactly, and what we're going to do now is going to send another request to Parliament to see those who submit their annual reports under Section 66D of the Constitution. They're supposed to submit reports to Parliament every year. So now we're going to do a follow-up FY to see all those state enterprises, ministries, statutory bodies, municipal corporations who have complied, who has not complied. I think we have to put this information out in the public domain. We have to start pressuring these agencies not to comply.
A lot of our listeners would like to put pressure on this. Guys, you can't do it alone. That's why I invited and have invited folks like Rishi here, because we can do it through his organization. Their organization will make the request for us, Rishi. In the 1 minute I've got remaining here, tell our listeners how they can join up with Disclosure today and put that consolidated pressure to get some answers.
Right, but you can check us out our website at www.disclosure.today. We're also on Facebook at Disclosure Today, and you can also check out our website, our blog website, our political website, which is www.polywatch.info. And you can always email me at Rishi, RISHI, at disclosure, DISCLOSURE.today. And that's to see exactly what's going on, what we're doing, how you can get involved, how you can be. My tagline for this year is to be a VIP. V being vigilant, I being innovative, and P being persistent. We need to be all these things in order for the country to move forward from where we are right now.
The best ally of democracy.
Yes.
Vigilance.
Yeah, always.
My brother, thank you so much, Rishi Maharaj. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me.
No
we will talk again as we always do. Take care now.